Coming to you fresh out of YouTube jail. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley, and this is The Unexpected Cosmology. I'm even starting 1 minute early tonight. I'm so excited to give this presentation. And you might be wondering what caused me to go into YouTube jail. Well, if you make it all the way to the end tonight, I will show you why it was. And I am on parole today. I wasn't able to do a presentation last night as I usually do. As soon as I saw I was free, set out on good behavior. I'm trying very hard to be good and not naughty. I will try so hard for you guys because, if I slip up, then that's another week that I don't get to come before you. And also quickly say this, I'll be saying this again Friday night. For those of you who were wondering, well, where's the Torah portional? Well, if you're actually in our Tuck community, if you're a member of the Tuck community, we didn't miss any readings. We were there. It was a very intimate time. Didn't skip a beat. We read it as a group. Pamela was there. She read through it. We discussed it. It was a great time, very intimate time. Let's get right into this because you're probably wondering, what's up with the green man, Noel? I mean, this is a question that I have been asking myself for a great long while. It's been in my stack of to-do list for years now. I've been very curious about the green man. I went through Europe and I saw him everywhere. I'm like, what is going on with this paganism? And it wasn't until really rather recently when I pushed it forward in my to-do list, kind of moved it to the top, because I started coming across some more information. I started pulling the string. I'm like, this is kind of interesting. And then I kept pulling, and I just, in my opinion, I cracked it open. So hope you guys enjoy this tonight. The Green Man versus the Millennial Kingdom. Of course, you can see the publication date right there, 7/30/2024. We are now in the month of August. And now I wanted to go straight for the camera and give this to you guys, but you guys know that I was locked behind social media bars this last week. There is a typical rebuttal to my thesis that the millennial kingdom of Messiah already physically manifested upon the earth, especially upon hearing that the 1,000 years constituting the Middle Ages were its beginning and ending mile markers in his story. Now, if you're completely lost on that, I have so much research on this. You're just going to have to go back and check my other videos. Check my last one I did on the 7,000 year timeline deception. They will fall back to the tiresome propaganda, which has the Dark Ages being as pagan as they come. You and I know that's not the case. The idols were added to the grand cathedrals at a much later hour, probably during the Enlightenment, the early Enlightenment. Still, though, among the many antagonists and among all those rebuttals, not one single person has thought to invoke the man of 1,000 faces into the conversation. The Green Man, as he is known, decorates the cathedrals across our realm, and yet hardly anyone seems to notice. Well, seeing as how I intend to turn over every stone in this investigation, I suppose the first thing that ought to be done is to show you examples of what the Green Man is, in case you've come into this completely unaware. From there, we will weigh the balances, being careful not to turn a blind eye to paganism whenever or wherever it happens to show face. So the one on the left there is probably the most popular Green Man, maybe just due to its location in Germany and all that, St. George being above him. I will show him, I'll go into detail on him at the very end. We see him in stone, we see him in arches, we see him on ceilings, we see him in wood, probably bronze, we see him in vases, we see him everywhere. And one of the things you want to pay attention to with the Green Man is the foliage by which he gets the name the Green Man, even though he's never depicted really as being green. But this foliage usually comes out of his mouth. Right there, you can see it coming out of his mouth. Once in a while, it will come out of his nose. Like right there, you can see it coming out of his nostrils, not his mouth. But in most cases, I think that one's the nostrils too. But in most cases, like over here, you see it coming out of his mouth. Right here, it comes out of his mouth, it grows around his head. This one over here on the right is really interesting because you don't usually see them flowering like that. And there's nothing green about this individual, but he's the flower man, I guess, flower power. But here's some more. And you're going to also see with the green man that there is no, there's no cookie cutter expression. Like over here, you see almost like a look of, I don't know if it's a look of terror or being comical, because the upside down people over here are laughing. So it's almost like this person over here shrieking is trying to be funny. Some look like they're dead, like this person over here with the eyes closed. Some seem to be staring off into space. Some are meditative. Some are angry. Or it just, you see a whole different mess of emotions on the green man. You see them carved into pews, pulpits, altars, windows, over doorways, arches. It looks like bookends. So there he is, the green man. I have offered dozens of examples and could doubtlessly show dozens more. In every single one, he's either etched into wood or carved into stone, and even the arches and the cloisters of one great cathedral or another, as if emerging from the very fabric of the frozen music, which we call Gothic architecture. Just look at him, why don't you? Staring down at us passerbys from the flickering shadows with those unknowable, seemingly malnourished thoughts of his, probably up to no good, I shouldn't wonder. Looking suspicious and as shady as Sheol. Must be pagan then. Oops, I guess we were wrong about everything, weren't we, guys? The trail has gone cold. Close the book. Go home and cry about it. It's over. We lost. The MK never happened. What do you know? All of history is legit after all. Everything they tell us about it. But no, really, unlike later facelifts by our controllers, I see absolutely no evidence that they were added, the green men, that they were added at another hour to deceive and lead us into idolatry, ultimately throwing us off the hound hunt. Look, either the Millennial Kingdom happens physically, or it didn't physically. I mean, it could have just been a spiritual kingdom, as the preterists claim. That's not my belief. And if it did happen, then we have the green man to contend with. Hands down. You can't get around it. Something is going on, and I intend to get to the bottom of it. By the way, if you went into this exercise without having the faintest clue as to who the green man was, then believe it or not, you've just been caught up to speed, because he is quite the mystery indeed. The green man is seemingly everywhere, and yet nobody knows who he is, why he's there, or how he came to be. There is not one ancient document pertaining to him. Nada. Zip. And why is that exactly? Like the carol, though it is also known as the rondeau, he's been scrubbed. Only his bones remain. Now, if you don't know what the carol is, of course, I've been trying to pick apart all the different elements of the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the medieval era, the 1,000 years I call the Millennial Kingdom, and everything from chess to the maypole to, of course, the carol, and that is the lost dance of the Millennial Kingdom, or I should say the lost dance of the medieval era, and it's been completely scrubbed too. We see it all over the earth. This circle dance where people hold hands, go in a circle. We know it was done all over, and yet there is not one record of it until the Enlightenment. And all the lyrics, all the musical notes, all the arrangement have all been scrubbed. Isn't that suspicious? Well, it's the same thing with the green man, right? So we know that the green man exists everywhere, and you think people would be talking about him. Where are the records? They don't exist. So that should, cause our suspicions. In fact, the green man didn't even arrive into our recorded collective consciousness until Lady Raglan, aka Juliet Somerset Hamilton, passed the information along. As the wife of 4th Baron Raglan, daughter of 11th Baron Belhaven and Stenton, Lady Raglan of Raglan Castle in Wales lived rather recently in history, if her birth and death dates of 1901 to 1971 are indicative of anything. She lived through, of course, both world wars. Though the Green Man may have gained minuscule notice by a select few, perhaps as early as the 19th century, probably the late 19th century, it was she who first came up with the name in her article, The Green Man in Church Architecture. Now, if you follow that link, if you are following the paper, which I linked the paper, of course, underneath my videos, I actually have her article on the unexpected cosmology, so you can read it. The original Green Man article that started the whole thing. And it was published in March 1939 edition of Folklore magazine. That's a local British magazine that now there's other folklore magazines. That one I don't think exists anymore. I actually tried to look this one up too. I'm a collector, a connoisseur of anything I research. I like to hold the actual article in my hands and read it. I was not able to track down a copy at all, like nothing available. I looked on eBay everywhere. Boo-hoo for me. Actually, Lady Raglan only published one article on folklore in her entire lifetime. Like this was a one-hit wonder for her, just one-off. Talk about a one-off. Her husband, on the other hand, Major Fitzroy Richard Somerset, was noted for his own variety of independent scholarship, having written The Hero in 1936, a comparative study involving the 22 things often found in stories of heroes, including dying on hilltops. It sounds like an interesting read. I actually want to read his book. As you can tell, Lady Raglan's single article not only appeared 3 years later, but it also had an instantaneous, far longer lasting influence than anything her husband had committed to writing. Like nobody knows anything that her husband wrote, and he was the writer, right? Every writer's like worst nightmare to struggle at it your whole life, and then you marry someone who just writes one article on her life, and it's like everyone's talking about it for the next century. Quoting from Julia Somerset. So this is Lady Raglan's article on the Green Man. It is now about 8 years ago since my attention was first drawn by the Reverend J. Griffith, then vicar of I guess it's like a Welsh name, Langwim. There's like no consonants or no vowels between those consonants. I don't know how to pronounce that. In Monmouthshire, and himself a folklorist, to a curious carving. It is a man's face. So this Reverend Griffith in a church, basically, he shows her 8 years earlier this face carving that nobody had ever seen before. And he's like, what do you think about this? And she says, it is a man's face with oak leaves growing from the mouth and ears and completely encircling the head. Mr. Griffith suggested that it was intended to symbolize the spirit of inspiration. Kind of interesting. But it seemed to me certain that it was a man and not a spirit, and moreover, that it was a green man. So I named it, and the evidence that I have collected to support this title is the reason for this paper, and that comes from Folklore, Volume 50, Number 1. If somebody is able to go and in the rummage bin or whatever and do a deep dive and find me a copy, or dumpster diving, get me a copy on the internet, I will be very grateful. With those opening words, the anonymous foliate head design seen everywhere by no one in medieval Europe, camouflaged and hidden in plain sight for untold decades, probably centuries, was finally aroused into the public consciousness. So what I'm saying is that it was this guy, and I'll be talking more about this tonight. The Green Man is everywhere. And how is it until the 1930s, nobody knew this guy existed? Nobody in any church. Though the Reverend J. Griffith had first drawn her attention to the carving, believing it to, quote unquote, symbolize the spirit of inspiration, Lady Raglan completely reworked its mythology. Here is what she has to say about him. Again, quoting from her article, this figure, I am convinced, is neither a figment of the imagination nor a symbol, but is taken from real life. And the question is whether there was any figure in real life from which it could have been taken. The answer, I think, is that there is but one of sufficient importance. The figure variously known as the Green Man, which, of course, she names him that there, but she adds in here Jack in the Green, Robin Hood, the King of May, and the Garland King, again from Folklore magazine. In one fell swoop, Julius Somerset managed to lump Green Man in with Jack in the Green, the King of May, and the Garland King, practically everything that has become dear to English paganism. And to be clear, she very well may be correct. I don't know. I don't think she's correct. She might be. Her Robin Hood connection is an interesting suggestion for sure. I have yet to comment upon the man in tights, and I actually want to. I really want to dig into Robin Hood among many other facets of the Dark Ages, though the mystery of the Maypole is something I have covered, and it relates to the carol. They're very likely all related in one way or another. Regarding Robin Hood, she says that England and Scotland had long referred to the oaken face as the man of legend, which may or may not be true. I wouldn't know. Adding that there is reason for thinking that his name is a corruption of Robin of the Wood. That's what Lady Raglan says. I happen to disagree on that last part. Unless she has seen grammatical evidence unknown to us, I think she's kind of reaching there. A lot of people do that online. They kind of grab at words and they try to make them mean something that they might not. I might have been guilty of that in the past as well. Then there is little reason, if any, to come to that conclusion, seeing as how Hood, Robin the Hood, has plenty of dark and sinister connotations as an uncorrupted word. So if you're changing it to the wood, you're now losing the very connotations of the hood. That's what I'm saying here. Like, there's no reason to say it's a, it's a mistranslation or a corruption of the wood. I will surely expound upon them if I ever get around to that paper, the connotations of Robin Hood. Look, I am not here to argue with the lovely Baroness of Raglan. I'm not, but simply to take what she has started, the forest fire, and then add commentary of my own. Following the paper trail, nobody would probably know about Lady Raglan's dubbing of the Green Man had it not been for Sir Nicholas Pevsner and his whopping 46-volume series of books, The Buildings of England, all of which were published between 1951 and 1974. And I think he's standing in front of his collection right there, all his books. A name like Pevsner doesn't sound very British, does it? I checked so that you wouldn't have to. It is a Yiddish name. And to erase any doubts, his daddy was a Jew. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, totally, not a problem with it. It's just interesting is all. How often Japheth's descendants through Ashkenaz have helped to shape heliocentric doctrines under the guise of being one of Shem's children. Just worth pointing out. Not that I have a problem with it. I'm sure Ashkenaz was a totally nice family man. He was the Green Man from that day forward, as far as terminology is concerned. From what I have been able to glean of his ideology, Pevsner held to the typical British enthusiasm for Arthurian folklore, as championed by the ever-influential James Frazer. Now, James Frazer is incredibly important to understand how our perception of the past will sometimes be based on the philosophy or the theology or the psychology, what have you, the archaeological stylings of one individual or another. Like, someone will come along, publish a book, and without ever having read it ourselves, we will take their point of view because we think that that's just the correct one because we've heard it so much. All right. So let's learn a little bit about James Frazer and how he has shaped the landscape of why we would look at these cathedrals and say they're pagan. First published in 1890, eventually expanding into 12 volumes by its third edition. I am inspired by that, just to let you guys know, because you guys know I like to do second, third. I am thinking I need to take a book that expand it so dramatically that it becomes 12. I need to do 13 or 14. I think I need to beat the 12. The influence of Frazer's The Golden Bough on contemporary European literature cannot be overstated. I mean, I'm going to understate it tonight. It cannot be overstated. Frazer's aim was to define the shared elements of world religions, discussing fertility rites, human sacrifice, the dying God, the scapegoat, and many other symbols and practices whose influences had extended into modern, quote unquote, Christian culture. His thesis is that the most ancient religions were fertility cults that revolved around the worship and periodic sacrifice of a sacred king in accordance with the cycle of the seasons. Not that I have a problem with that either. I don't. How many times do I really have to go over the mystery religions as introduced by the Anunnaki and the Watchers? And you can see a couple links there. You can follow that to my research on that. Just some of it. I mean, I quote from it so often. There is most certainly a commonality as Azazel and his co-conspirators introduced and disseminated the mysteries of heaven to the world, by which each school, the disseminated schools, attempted to monopolize what they held in their bosom. Whatever they can get in their arms, they're trying to monopolize it as their own. Not repeating all of that again, nor how I feel about truth mixed with the lies of our spiritual controllers. Frazer emphasized gradual continuity with and preservation of a primitive pagan tradition as gloried through Camelot. And Pevsner, as well as Lady Raglan before him, thought very much in those terms, which is why the Green Man was immediately assigned into the lower echelons of the religio-political columns, rather than relegating him as a potential innovation of the Middle Ages. So if you're lost by that, you imagine like on an evolutionary geological scale, right? You're going from like simpler forms to more complicated ones, right? And what he's basically saying is that what Lady Raglan is basically saying, based on James Frazer's work, because James Frazer never noticed the green men, and he was a British dude. He never noticed them, from what I can tell. She's basically saying that clearly the green man, he cannot be introduced into the Middle Ages. He has to be much older, and it was really a fertility god that was very wildly popular through the Dark Ages, and they were pagan as hell. And, they were like worshiping these pagan deities right alongside Mashiach. Now, I know the Catholic Church and all that, right? I'm not going down that route tonight. I'm not going down that research, but so let's keep reading. Actually, let's look at some pictures. So these are pictures of the Green Man in very recent years. I mean, we're talking the last 20, 30 years. So here on the right is the Green Man at Scarborough Fair. We see the Green Man at Burning Man in 2007. And I think the picture on the right, that's not Burning Man. That is a Green Man festival in Wales that's held every year now. We see the Green Man going up against Jack Frost. So he's mixing with Jack Frost. We see this over here is if you can see my mouse, that's the Green Man, like a parade that happens every year. Now the LGBTQ community is really into the Green Man. So we got the drag queens dressing up as the Green Man. You see Jack in the Green over here mixed in. And then, of course, there's a Green Man poster over there. So with Pevsner, Lady Raglan's vision was secured. The fallout was gradual, though defined, beginning with the Intel decade that was the 60s. The Green Man was adopted by hippies and other New Agers who together transformed the face of folkloric imagery and to the point of becoming a countercultural icon in the early 21st century. The Green Man Festival was founded in Wales in 2003. So I want you to pay attention. There's a point to what I'm talking about right here, the paganism. I want you to pay attention to how recent this was in history. The Green Man Festival was founded in Wales in 2003, which then gave way not only to his emergence at Scarborough Fair in 2007, but he was also quite literally the theme of Burning Man that same year. 1 year later, and so that's interesting when you see in like twice in the same year, we know what we're looking at. There's quite clearly a push from certain individuals onto the public consciousness. There's a push happening. 1 year later, in 2008, he was dramatized in combat with Jack Frost at a community festival in Yorkshire. And somewhere around the same era, he became a staple of the Jack in the Green parade. In little time, it is not surprising to see drag queens take on the Green Man moniker as well, seeing as how androgyny represents the death and resurrection of man or woman, and resurrection is what the Green Man very well may turn out to be about. I mean, that's what, androgyny is, right? The whole, I'm actually surprised that the trans movement at this point is just almost purely exoteric on the national scale. I mean, I'm surprised it's not like a big spiritual movement. I think it probably already has to be, and we're just not being told about it, because it is a very spiritual statement on their end. Well, I'm here to tell you that the alphabet people have stolen the rainbow. They have stolen the word gay. Can I say that on YouTube? I think I can. They have stolen the word gay, and they have stolen the green man, and I want them all back. At the Jack in the Green wiki page, you can follow along. If you are following along with the paper, there's a link. We come to learn that the tradition only developed in England during the 18th century. So there's something else I want you to see here. So we see publicly the green man in our consciousness. He's only been around 20 years. That's it. Last 20 years. And we think it, like when we see this, we take the theory of James Frazer up here and we go, well, clearly, he is this ancient pagan deity. He's been around forever. He's just kind of more popular. That's not true. He's completely invented. Brand new last 20, 30 years. We just take this theory and we run with it with the geological columns. That's a grave mistake. You'll get the point. It's almost like the rainbow. Okay, think about children today. The sad fact of the matter is, I think most of my audience, I'm a middle-aged man. Most of my audience is my age or older, though I hope I don't scare the kids away with that kind of statement. I don't meet a lot of young people in my audience, and I'm assuming, I could be in arrogance, but I am assuming that if I were to talk to most children today, public school children, and ask them about the rainbow, they would have absolutely no knowledge of Genesis. They would have no knowledge that the rainbow appeared after flood with Noah's family. To them, the rainbow would be an ancient symbol of the LGBTQ movement, really a grooming symbol that they wouldn't use in those terms. But my audience would go, no, actually, we know when that was adopted, and that was actually, the 60s, 70s. It really probably started taking off in the 70s and 80s. You see it everywhere now, but as 100 years ago, you talk to anybody and they knew that the rainbow originated with Noah's flood. You see how history is being rewritten. It's the same thing with the green man. That's the point I want to make tonight. So anyways, with Pevsner, Lady Raglan's vision. Okay, I went through this. So at the Jack in the Green wiki page, we come to learn that the tradition only developed in England during the 18th century. Enlightenment territory. This would be post-millennial kingdom, according to my timeline thesis. It emerged from an older May Day tradition, but not even that was recorded until the 17th century. And that's, if you need to do the math on that, that's the 1600s, 2 or 3 centuries after the Middle Ages were through. In that one, follow along, milkmaids carried milk pails that had been decorated with flowers. Sounds like Beaver Cleaver territory. I mean, call me a square, but if hundreds of milkmaids went walking down the street, having just arrived from their butter churning in the Alps, perchance with bill-clinging cows in tow, I'd line up to see that. Well, increasingly, the milk pails were replaced with pyramids. Of course they were, which they wore upon their heads, naturally. And eventually the chimney sweeps moved in looking for a good time. I'm still, just so you know, I spent some time looking at the chimney sweeps. Apparently the chimney sweep people, the chimney people from Mary Poppins are really into May Day. I don't have the faintest clue why. I don't know. Maybe it gets so stuffy up in those chimneys and they're so filled, their skin is so stained with soot that they're happy for the arrival of summer. I don't really know what's going on. But or maybe it's just the Mary Poppins milkmaids come into town. The chimney sweeps are like the sailors out there. I don't really know what's going on. The earliest known account of Jack in the Green only emerged during a London May Day procession in 1770. So now in 1770, you have this Jack in the Green fellow arrive out of nowhere. All right, not an ancient deity, and for whatever reason, chimney sweeps were pulling the puppet strings on that one as well. I smell the doings of Mary Poppins all over this. Interestingly enough, the tradition died out in the 20th century. It then reemerged as a pagan celebration. Go figure. As though it had always been pagan. And as you know by now, the Green Man was involved this time around. Actually, much later than even the 20th century. As though he'd always been there. Wiki places folklorist Lady Raglan and James Frazer at the helm of influence, along with a certain Margaret Murray. So let's look into Margaret Murray. Who is Margaret Murray? Well, I'm glad you asked. Quoting from her wiki page, Murray, born in British India in 1863, became closely involved in the first wave feminist movement. Of course she was. As an Egyptologist, she was unable to return to Egypt due to the First World War, and so passed away the hours focused upon what truly made her popular, the witch cult hypothesis. The theory has the witch trials of early modern Christendom being an attempt to extinguish a pre-Christian pagan religion devoted to a horn god which had survived through the Middle Ages. Her theory fits in nicely with all the others, which we are all expected to roll with, the original Knights Templars being secret Satanist, and just being one of them. Although academically discredited, not that I'm praising the academics in any way, shape, or form. Just put this out there that there is basically nothing in academia that supports her theory. All right, take that for what it is. The witch cult theory gained widespread attention, probably even influencing Lady Raglan, and proved a significant influence on the emerging new religious movement of Wicca. Why am I not surprised? Figures. All feminism, I'm going to lose some subscribers for this. I might go back into YouTube jail. I'm not really sure. But all feminism, even the earliest feminist movement, eventually leads to witchcraft. Some people are just rolling my eyes at me right now. But the feminists and the witches will jointly disagree, I'm sure. In simply suggesting Jack in the Green was a survival of pre-Christian fertility rituals, the pagans went with it, with hardly anyone checking their sources. And that's the whole thing, right? Somebody, comes out with a theory and we just all run with it. And it gets us into a heap of trouble. To quote from Simon Garfunkel, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. Just looking at those photos that I'd shown a moment or two ago, you'd think the Green Man was an ancient tradition going back ages into the pre-Christian era. No, he is conceptually only so many decades old as what I can count on one hand. At most, one or two extra fingers on the second, not the middle one. All the same, Jack in the Green appears to be an Enlightenment invention, albeit a corruption of what may have preceded it. And I had mentioned this earlier, the kids today probably think the rainbow is an ancient LGBTQIP2SAA+ ? Symbol as well. I can't even keep up with all the acronyms now or what they all mean. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how his story is rewritten. Lady Raglan further theorized that the medieval cathedral was to be, to an illiterate people, living in their own fleas and feces and, mounds of poo, the sum of all human knowledge in stone, including paganism and the sciences. Mind you, that is quite a different statement than saying they were intended to teach the heavenly mysteries, which I believe they were. If Lady Raglan is correct and paganism was an accepted antidote of the day, then that goes against everything we know regarding medieval artwork, designed for a very specific purpose. I go into why that is, first and foremost, in my Wastelands of the Seraphim paper. If you guys haven't read that, I recommend go check that one out from the library. Though the Pilgrim's Path and Labyrinths presentations I gave this last spring also seal the deal. Cathedrals were pilgrimage sites where one might discover a manifestation of the kingdom from above, within and without. Within those cathedrals was the artwork. The artwork was intended to teach morality lessons using scripture as its peripheral vision, all of which directed the soul upwards towards their ultimate pilgrimage destination. I include the Green Man in that. Just so we're clear, The green man is so common in the Gothic cathedrals that I challenge you to enter a single one of them in France or in Britain and probably the surrounding countries, all the way up into Germany, and come out empty-handed, having scoured every wall, ceiling, and cloister. After saintly people and angelic beings, 1 and 2, saintly people and angelic beings, number 3 is the green man. He's the most common image in medieval sculpture. He's everywhere, with many cathedrals containing dozens of green men, not the little green men, and some cathedrals, a few hundred or more. Contrast the green man of the medieval ages with Lady Raglan's version of the green man today, which drives people away from the medievalist vision into one of paganism, completely opposite direction than all medieval artwork attests to. This is why her theory is incorrect. This is why you cannot say that the green man was leading people to pagan gods. It goes against everything we see in the artwork of the day. Read that last sentence again and again if you have to. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, is a medieval saying, by the way. It means that you can only judge the quality of something after you have tried, used, or experienced it. Well, Lady Raglan's experience is all wrong. If it were the right interpretation, then cathedral pilgrims everywhere would have been succumbing to paganism as well. Some of you are just nodding, because you guys think the Dark Ages were totally pagan, and I don't. And they didn't. The complete opposite is true. A spoonful of that pudding is all I need to know we're letting our pagan inheritors paint the canvas of his story with their version of events, not the true ones. So let's see if I can read this. I actually pulled this from, in my investigation, I came across this fascinating article this guy wrote. He was like a really big on the green man. He lives over in Britain, and he just goes over to different churches trying to find them. And he says, a few years ago, I visited the church in an English market town in the hope of finding one of these images. I searched the church, and eventually in the furthest corner, I found one hidden behind and between some carved foliage at shoulder level. A man of retirement age who was working in the church inquired about my interest, and when I told him I had found a green man, he responded with, "Never, show me." When he saw it, he said, "I have worshipped in this church since I was boy in the choir, and no one has ever seen that before. Wait till I tell the vicar. I bet he gives us a sermon on it." The only shocking part is, as I've already stated, absolutely no commentary has been found on the green man from the medieval period, or even the Enlightenment thereafter, telling us that whatever information we have, specifically just describing those faces, was scrubbed. What's more, anyone may enter a Gothic cathedral and stumble upon a green man image, though until a few short decades ago, they were previously unknown. Now, I re-emphasize this, the story here I just read to you. The old man might have been perplexed at such an oversight, meaning that he had grown up there since he was a boy, and he can't believe that he had never seen it before. Not simply by the old man, but by everyone. Everyone in that church had mistakenly passed it right by. Though the recent flat earth awakening, as well as the mud flood and the millennial kingdom that we're looking into now, has taught me that the truth can and will remain hidden in plain sight until it's ready to be revealed. By the way, I can totally see a scenario where the Mandela effect added them to the catalog sometime in the 1800s, meaning they weren't there and then they were. Supposing you're familiar with my research into the blending of realities, I am of the opinion that it has been happening in waves for a great long while, not over the last 20 years, but over the last so many hundreds of years. And that every generation has been dealing with this. The difference is they didn't have the internet to talk about it. Probably more people accepted the reality changes and then because they didn't know how to deal with it otherwise. I won't be going that route in case you were wondering, though it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest to learn that the green man suddenly appeared in the 1930s and that nobody knew who he was. Now, we are often told that the green man foliate heads first appeared in England during the early 12th century. That's what the archaeologists tell us now, having arrived from France, and that it was brought over from Crusader knights. Again, that's the official history. The earliest that I can find, however, appears to be a Byzantine mosaic dating from the 6th century AD MK territory, the very beginnings of it, and in Constantinople of all places. Chalk it up to more pagan deities, or perhaps the chronologists are wrong. Crusader knights introduced nothing and something else is going on. So what are we looking at here? Okay, this is from Exeter Cathedral right here. Beautiful ceiling. I mean, everything about this cathedral is just stunning, stunning, stunning. And but what you want to look at here is, so we have these like angels over here playing tambourines, but over here we have a picture of Mary, the Queen of Heaven. I just said it, with the baby, angels above, but she's standing on this green man right here. She's standing on his head, and the vines are coming out of his mouth, and the plant is growing out of his mouth and coming up and surrounding Mary and the baby, and kind of creating these like foliate, or these blossoming, maybe even blossoming flowers all around her, though they kind of look like oaken leaves. It's hard to tell, but I'd have to get close to that to see. The typical green man narrative begins to take a drastic narrative turn at Exeter Cathedral in England, and I'm about to tell you what it is. Though the pagan hypothesis people would rather not see him in his intended light. Look at the various photos which I have shown you. In one of them, the Virgin Mary, I put the Virgin May there, the May Queen. The Virgin Mary can be seen holding the Christ child, standing upon the head of a green man. What the Sheol is happening? Well, according to Lady Raglan, the fact is, she quotes, I think, from about this actual green man here. The fact is that unofficial paganism subsisted side by side with the official religion. And this explains the presence of our green man in a church window with the Virgin beside him and below him, the sun. Okay, so she's actually quoting from a different green man, but the point remains. That is to say, whenever Mary and the Christ child enter the same scene as a green man, according to her and anyone who follows her train of thought, it is proof of a mutual pagan relationship. Kathleen Basford continues Lady Raglan's interpretation in The Green Man, published in 1978, addressing the actual green man I just showed you at Exeter Virgin. The Exeter Virgin and Child, specifically, she claims the Virgin is, quote unquote, treading on the head of the green man, as she might tread on the head of the old serpent, the tempter himself, as put forward by the Genesis 3 prophecy. Throughout her book, she talks of a demonic character in green man carvings, going so far as to conflate the green man with that of Satan and the devil. And yet, depending upon which green man you encounter, as I showed you at the beginning, he is angry, he is silly and comical, or perhaps deep and contemplative, sometimes even melancholy or sorrowful. He's a mixed bag of emotions, exemplifying the many different complex layers of the human experience, all of which is intended to combine and culminate with joy. Don't believe me? I'll show you why. Go back and look at the various green men again. In nearly every portrait, shrubbery emerges from his face. To be more precise, the sprout originates from his mouth, those I showed, sometimes his nose, or other holes in his head, I guess his ears or wherever. Lady Raglan and her disciples can continue with their misguided thinking, but the truth of the matter is that the green man has already been identified, ignored by just about everyone, though clearly identified. Indeed, there are medieval texts which describe precisely what is happening. The green man is Adam. Take another look at the green man of Exeter again. So I'm just going to show you this before I describe it. See over there on the right. Look at how Mary is standing on his head. Mary is not treading upon the head of the serpent. Contrarily, it is the green man, the first man, which is supporting the second Eve and the second Adam. I covered Mary, the mother's role as second Eve, as well as Mary of Migdal's role as second Eve. They both play the part of a second Eve character in my Mary of Migdal's second Eve paper. Read all about it. Of course, hardly anyone watched that video. I thought it was fascinating. A lot of people aren't, I guess, kind of interested in that. The vine which protrudes from his open mouth branches upwards and blossoms into dozens of oaken leaves which surround mother and child like a garland. The tree branching from Adam's mouth, and why would there be a plant emerging from it, is what confuses most people, though even it has its own story to tell. Now, here you can see a medieval illustration of this. You can see right here a tree growing out of a skull. That tree is later chopped down, and then it becomes the tree in which Yahusha is hung from. Now, this comes right here from the Golden Legend, the death of Adam and the tree of mercy. And in the end of his life, when he should die, it is said, but of non-authority, that he sent Seth, his son, into paradise for to fetch the oil of mercy. Interesting thing about this is we have many different books which talk about this very event, where he received certain grains of the fruit of the tree of mercy by an angel. Now, you might be asking, well, what's the tree of mercy? Well, there's a lot of different trees in the garden. And when he came again, he found his father Adam yet alive and told him what he had done. And then Adam laughed first and then died. And then he laid the grains or kernels under his father's tongue and buried him in the vale of Hebron. That's interesting right there. It says in here Hebron. Now, I've pointed out in the past that we see, was Adam buried under Jerusalem or was he buried in Hebron? The Jews say Hebron. And so it's kind of interesting here in the Golden Legend to see agreements with, would be referring to the very cave that later Abraham purchased, and he and his wife and his sons and their wives, minus Rivka, were buried there. Anyways, out of his mouth grew 3 trees of the 3 grains, of which trees the cross that our Lord suffered his passion on was made, by virtue of which he got very mercy and was brought out of darkness into very light of heaven. It's kind of an old English. To the which he brings us that liveth and resigneth God, world without end, the Golden Legend. The Gothic cathedrals were intended to teach the heavenly mysteries, not paganism, LOL. Now, we could have that whole discussion about the Roman Catholic Church and all that. You guys know my position that the inheritors came in, the controllers, they whipped up some idolatry and all different things in there. But the bones of the cathedrals themselves are not pagan, and I do believe the Green Man was attached to them originally. If you ever come across a laughing Green Man and wonder what it is that he could possibly find so funny, now you know. Adam's famous last words were those of laughter. We actually have a multitude of texts which describes Seth's journey to paradise, some of which Eve went on with her son Seth, hoping to fetch the oil of mercy. Going through each of those seems completely unnecessary to this discussion. What seems evident here is that Seth planted seeds in his father's mouth, resulting in 3 trees, specifically the tree of mercy, of which the wood of the true cross was eventually produced. The Book of the Penitence of Adam is another one. I have never read it, though I am told the manuscript is being held hostage in the library of the Arsenal, so I will be sure to give it a read the next time I'm in Paris. I say that because I am told it is a manuscript dealing with the oh no world of Kabbalah, though cannot personally verify that. Well, in that account, according to the Book of the Penitence, I'm sorry, not the Pestilence, the Book of the Penitence of Adam, Seth once more reaches the gate of paradise, only to behold the trees of life and knowledge, which had joined to form a single Kabbalah tree or whatever. I'm just reading the footnotes on this one, or the Cliff's Notes, I should say. Like the other account, the seeds from the tree were placed into Adam's mouth when he died. Only this time, the vegetation is given an entire biography. From Adam's mouth grew the burning bush. In turn, the burning bush produced a magic wand, which Moses planted into the Ark of the Covenant. Now, of course, this is the Kabbalah version. Later on, David planted that wand on Mount Zion. Solomon cut down the resulting triple tree so as to construct the pillars of Jachin and Boaz in the temple. Another portion was inserted into the threshold of the great gate, permitting no unclean thing to enter. It was, however, removed by wicked priests, weighted down by stones, and thrown into the temple reservoir, where it was hidden and guarded by an angel. During Messiah's lifetime, the reservoir was drained, and the piece of wood was recovered, being employed as a bridge leading across the brook of Kidron, over which Jesus passed after his arrest on the Mount of Olives. It was then made into the cross on which he was crucified. Now, if you're curious as to why a book from the Kabbalah tradition is talking about Messiah, Jesus, I'm confused as you are, except to say that it probably was a Christian text, which they are saying had Kabbalistic ties to it. I don't know. I can't tell you, because I like to do my book reports by reading the source material and not reading you the only online notes I can get. That's what I have. So sorry. You will have to live in that uncertainty. Unless if someone can go to Paris and check out the book for me and take pictures and translate it as well. It's probably in Latin. And so, as you can see, the growth which emerged from the green man was symbolic of the resurrection after all. The restoration of Adam as well as his children through the Yeshua, the salvation of Mashiach. It is absolutely true that the cathedrals were built to exemplify the mysteries of heaven, and every instance of the green man would most likely be inferring stories such as the one I've just read or summed up for you. Need I remind you that the tree of knowledge of good and evil produced grapes, and that the wine of Noah's vineyard is directly related to it? I mean, his vineyard came from paradise, from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course, all grapes to this day come from Noah's vineyard, I assume. I could be wrong about that, but that's the assumption. From the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Well, then, so is Mary Magdalene and the Holy Grail. She's, of course, related to this as well, to this very tree. Some people say that the Grail came out of the tree of mercy. Carved in wood upon the chancel ceiling at the Church of St. Andrew in Sampford, Courtenay, Devon, and that's, you guys can look that up on the map, is yet another green man carving which is not to be avoided. I was holding out on you, saving one of the very choicest examples for last. Once again, we see vines emerging from the mouth of the green man. And who does he remind you of exactly? Pray tell. Well, I will tell you. He has a Christ-like appearance, but not just any Christ-like figure. He happens to resemble the face of the man in the shroud of Turin. Unbelievable. I mean, that is the face of the man in the shroud of Turin. I every time I bring up the shroud of Turin, there's somebody out there who just says, no, man, no way. That's like, they talk about how they think, Mashiach was so ugly. And they're like, well, that man's too good looking in there. And that, they always use that one verse as evidence to debunk the entire shroud. Nobody can debunk the shroud. Nobody can do it. It is an amazing, amazing relic. And I do believe it is the actual cloth that he was buried in. And again, disprove it. No, people get mad because they can't do it. Just go disprove it. Disprove that it is everything they have pulled out of it. And again, this goes against the, in my opinion, the last Templar theory. We are seeing images of this man in the shroud, very, very old. Some goes back to like the 6th century. And I don't know how old this one, they would probably say this is like 11th century or the like, but still really old. We have a doppelganger. He's on a crossbeam as well, a warp and a wolf, or a tav, as I like to call it. Yahushua HaMashiach's calling card. Are they coming clean and telling us that the first Adam looked exactly like the second Adam? And we have cases of that in Scripture. There's a good reason to think that Messiah looked just like Joseph. Or are they tired of everyone else beating around the bush, no pun intended, and getting right to the point of the green man mythos, telling you that he is also the green man because he is the second Adam who, brought resurrection to the world, just as we see with the cyclical feast, right? All right, now where are we now? We're at Bamberg Cathedral in Germany, and I told you I would get to this at the end. You can see this is probably, like I said, this is probably the most famous green man right here. I want you to look at these two cathedral towers. Tell me what they look like to you. Just take a moment to look at them. Here we see these three interesting figures over here. I will quickly comment on them. I could, do a whole tour. Not that I'm going to, but specifically, this is the close-up of the green man. But you could see he looks, he's almost looks like a bookshelf over here. You can see him right underneath, and above him is this mystery man on a horse, a very good-looking man on a horse. Don't really know who he is. Bamberg Cathedral in Germany is a bit of a paradox in that two sets of opposing towers record completely separate styles on the architectural column. Romanesque on the left. You can see the Romanesque right here. Romanesque on the left and Gothic on the right. The official explanation is that these cathedrals took hundreds of years to build, as they often say. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine spending your entire life as a mason building a cathedral, knowing that you're going to die and your son is going to spend his whole life building it? He's going to die. Your son's sons. I mean, we're talking 300 years, right? And they tell us they lived like 30 years back then, right? I mean, a lot of generations apparently to build these things. And so they say that it took so long to build this one that they actually had to create two different opposing architectural styles. I don't know how many of you are believing that. I think it actually is, we might have I don't know if I want to call this a smoking gun, but an interesting piece of evidence to show a composites of styles that they coexisted together in some regards. Well, then I'll go ahead and ask what many of you are probably already thinking. Was there a blending of styles because both appeared on the architectural column around the same time? Other titillating aspects of Bamberg Cathedral have statues of biblical saints like Stephen, and I showed you, you can see the picture still up there, standing and interacting with contemporary rulers, causing one to ponder how much of this really comes down to artistic liberty. I mean, think about that. So, and it is interesting. That's something I don't know if people have really looked into, and maybe I need to do a whole thing on it, is they would often paint different biblical figures from like Old Testament, New Testament, standing together, and then with living people as well. It's like, well, that's really interesting. And they were interacting with each other. Well, at Bamberg Cathedral is what just may be the most popular green man of them all. I started out this very paper with an up-close and personal shot of him. He has shifty eyes, causing green men researchers such as Kathleen Basford to declare he is the dark counterpart of the equestrian. Not that again. Who is this mysterious horseman? Hard to say. There are so many different theories as to who the handsome lad is. A king or a pope or an emperor or the emperor's brother or the king's nephew or the pope's uncle, that I would bore you if I attempted every single one. There is one theory that he is one of the three wise men staring off at the Star of Bethlehem, but then where are the other two? And why is there a green man under one of the wise men? That doesn't make any sense. Why hardly anyone is claiming the figure to be St. George is only a little odd, since technically the cathedral's official name is Bamberger Dom St. Peter und St. George. It's named after St. George. Yet nobody wants to say the equestrian is St. George. Those same theorizers would have you think George is treading upon the green man. Now, there are people out there that say it's St. George, but like I just said, they're like, no, he's treading upon the green man. You see what I'm saying? Because he slayed the dragon, just as he might conquer the dragon. But let's not tread those tracks again. Yet another theory supported by Heinz, I'm going to mispronounce this last name, sounds German, Mohring of the University of Bayreuth, holds that the figure represents Messiah. According to the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 19, 11 through 16. Hey, I have an idea. How about I just quote it for you? This is what it says. I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the word of Elohim. The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of Yahweh Sevaoth. On his robe and on his thigh, he has this name written, King of Kings and Yahweh Adonai. Revelation 19:11 through 16. If you're wondering what Yahweh is, that is the Paleo-Hebrew translation. A lot of people come over here complaining about me saying that, but I don't know if they realize that we actually publish Paleo-Hebrew scripture here. This is not one of them. I just put in the name Yahuwah there. But we are publishing them. So just so everybody knows that, we love studying out the Paleo. So anyways, supposing the Mashiach translation is the proper one, and considering the green man whom he is using as his foundation, just like Mary and the child, I think it to be so. Then we are given further testimony to Yahuwah being the King of Kings during the Middle Ages, the Millennial Kingdom. You will ask me why he doesn't resemble the man in the shroud, like we saw with the other green man. Easily explained. I will redirect you to my Bezorah Kifa Gospel of Peter commentary, in which I go into docetism. It could be docetism, depending on the C, whether it's soft or hard. A medieval claim which has the resurrected Mashiach appearing to one as a child, another as an old man, never looking quite the same to any two individuals who gaze upon him. And that was a very popular theme in the Dark Ages, believe it or not. I mean, their themes, whether it is all invented later on or not, I can't particularly say, but the views that if you were to talk to just, even according to the official narrative, guys, just the official narrative, all right, if you were to go back to the Dark Ages and talk to just average Christian, they would have such different views of scripture than like the Protestant lens that we, wear when we, look back at it today. And that was a very common view, that to see Messiah, many people claim to see him. And there's a great passage in Acts of Peter. And Peter, there's these three different women. They're older women. They all said they saw Messiah in a vision. And Peter says, well, describe to me what he looked like. And one say he looked like a babe or a young boy, maybe another, a handsome young man, another, an old man or whatever. And it was all different. One, it was always different depending on who you talk to. So kind of interesting thought. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that tonight. And I want to show you guys why I was taken down this last week. Here is the video right here. If you go to my Patreon page, which is linked below all these videos, you can go there. This is free. You do not have to be a Patreon member to view this. This was just an online catalog or video catalog, I should say, I put together with Don. It's called Tea for the Soul, a catalog of Don's health products in which he goes through what we sell on our channel. And it's just wonderful. I mean, the thing is when I put a store together, I didn't want to put a store where I'm just, slapping some logo onto mugs and pencils and pens and shirts and hats, that kind of stuff. I wanted to put out unique products. Of course, we put out books, original books. We put out finely edited, very old books that hardly anyone has read, books of interest, earth mystery books, religious books, spiritual insight. And of course, we put out Don's health products. Go check it out. And I'm also looking for ministry supporters. I really need your help. If you enjoy my content, if this has blessed you in your household, if this has given you insight into your spiritual walk and your discoveries, please, pray about it, but, and ask Yah. But we're looking for your support. Patreon is a good place to go. And the great thing about Patreon is that whatever you sign up for, whether it's $5 a month, $5, hey, $5 makes a difference. If everybody gave $5, we'd be good to go. Just for watching my 20 videos a month I put out, just $5 a month, right? but $5, 15, 30, 50, 75, 100, 150, 500, whatever you give, up to like $150, you get that back every single month in the exact amount in a coupon for our store. You don't have to spend it, but if you want, you get that same amount back investment to go to our store. And we are dropping new products like crazy. I mean, every month, this month, I think we have three or four new books coming out that came out. Some months it's just one book per month. Sometimes it's 3 or 4, but we're just putting out a lot of stuff. So thank you everybody for your support of this ministry. Consider coming to our Tuck community, our Discord group. It gets broken. The link gets broken a lot under YouTube. I'm always trying to fix it because it gets outdated. But when you can nab a good link, come on in, say hi to us. Look forward to meeting you. And you can talk to me personally, ask questions, that kind of stuff. Good night, everybody.